Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Welcome to Zyxel's Tech Talk. My name is Tri Wint, and I am the sales manager, product manager here at Zyxel North America. Thank you for being here, spending time with me and with Zyxel and learning about fiber. And we're going to be kind of discovering about what fiber is, a little bit more in-depth information there, and also our products that support fiber and the different applications that you can use it for, and kind of what scenarios you would use it. And hopefully you'll learn something while we go along as well. I sure learned a few things as I was going through all these slides as well myself. And but if you want to make this interactive, I love for it to be interactive. Please use the Q&A section to ask your questions, and I will answer them, or try to at least answer them as we go through the presentation. I have a lot of slides to kind of go through, so let's make this quick and efficient, especially because we want to value your time as well. So again, thank you so much. We just have a quick introduction of who we are. Zyxel Networks, 32 plus years now in the networking industry, making products to 100 million devices, making connections globally. We have 700 plus employees worldwide in 150 markets. Over 1 million businesses are using Zyxel solutions today. And we are segmented out into 3 regions. We have our West, our Central, and our East and Canada regions. And these sales managers will represent and be your advocate and be your ally on anything you need to do related to Zyxel. So whether it be pre-sales, post-sales support, tech support, systems engineering support, or distribution, products, availability, pricing, deal reg, all of that, we're here to help you and facilitate that through the channel with you. We're trusted to deliver our solutions to millions of end users out there through a lot of different brands. These are just a few of those that we've partnered with or been deploying with through our partners like yourself. Just actually a quick question before we go move further. How many of you are already doing fiber deployments, like whether you're just uplinking fiber, maybe building to building fiber, or even maybe offering fiber to the prem or fiber to a multi-tenant unit? Okay, thank you. It just gives me an idea of how many people here are actually using fiber, because it's always available in the business class products. So I'm always curious, it's there, but do people actually use it? Are people actually taking advantage of what it does? Especially now because Ethernet is more available in the 10 gig space, but we'll talk about that. Our brand is an award-winning brand across internationally recognized. And we work with industry partners and leaders in different segments of the industry, and also with different solutions, especially on the security side or on the wireless side, implementations of solutions and functionalities that those companies provide to kind of shore up and to make our products even better. So that's what we kind of partner with. And because we work with partners like yourself and we make the product both on the software and the hardware side, we like to provide a complete solution that meets our clients' needs. So the whole entire ecosystem for different verticals, and then feedback from partners like yourself. That's where we get a lot of our, kind of field market information and how to move forward with different products and different functionalities. So if you have any, ideas on how we can make our products work better for you and your clients, of course, please let us know, and we will definitely take that, into serious consideration and see if we can implement those things for you. We are an end-to-end provider of networking solutions. So anything under the sun that connects to a network, we have some sort of device or solution that will connect that and make that function, from security to wireless to switching with PoE, multi-gig, 10 gig. And then of course, today we're talking about fiber solutions, and then gateway access solutions for hotspot, and then manage it either in a standalone, in a cloud-based, or even on a kind of a central managed kind of system that's outside of those two other management options there as well. And it can implement into different third parties, with, if it's syslog or if it's SNMP, we can network manage our devices that way through that as well. So today I wanted to cover, a little bit about fiber. I think it's a lot more driven by the fact that we have fiber uplinks in most of our business class switches, but we haven't really talked about it most of the time. People just either use it or don't. Many offices just have a single switch and they just happen to have, 2 to 4 fiber uplinks up there, but whether they use it to actually uplink things, it's a question that I'm posing to you. Is that something that you find useful? But I'll definitely talk about some of the applications where fiber makes sense, and maybe that can open up some opportunities for you as well. Not only from office to office or just inside office connectivity, but also expand you into multi-building or multi-tenant type units. Or if you are kind of an ISP or inspiring to be an ISP, you could provide fiber to the home or fiber to the prem type solutions as well with Zyxel solutions. So a quick introduction of just the naming convention that we use here at Zyxel. If you're not familiar, ES stands for 100 megabit switch. A GS is a gigabit switch, which supports 1 gig connections. An MG switch that you start seeing now is the multi-gig. They typically are the kind of the lower end MG switches for small businesses. XS is a switch that is the Roman numeral for 10, which is X. It supports up to 10 gig or multi-gig across all the ports. XGS is a gigabit switch with 1 gig ports, but it has 10 gig uplinks, and they could be copper or SFP fiber. XMG is a new model line that we have launched that supports multi-gig and 10 gig uplinks, and it could be a combination between fiber and copper as well in those combinations. Today, not as important, but we're talking about if it ends in HP, it stands for a PoE switch. I guess it is important because you could still connect fiber between, some PoE switches as well. EP is our econo power or lower budget, more cost effective from a PoE budget standpoint. It's our EP. FP is kind of a higher power budget models that we've launched just recently in our 2200 series. So they have a higher power budget than we have in our normal standard switches. And then if it ends in F, those are the ones that are fiber switches. That means they have fiber ports, either gigabit, et cetera. And then it may have gigabit, 10 gig uplinks or things like that. But F just stands for the main ports are fiber. So those are kind of the main naming conventions. And if it has SFP, anywhere in the descriptions or support, that means it supports 1 gig SFP transceivers. And if it says it's an SFP plus, then it's a 10 gig transceiver port. And so there's different combinations. You can see the middle switch there. That's a fiber switch. So it has all fiber transceiver seat docks there. And then the bottom one is a complete, 48 port. It's our 42F series. And that takes all, SFP fiber as well. I will have a question at the end, kind of on when we talk about the future of where fiber is and different fiber switch ports, and if you as a partner have any kind of requirements. But each one of those fiber ports then requires an additional, like a transceiver module, either SFP or SFP plus. Now, good thing is SFP plus is backwards compatible, so you could use a 1 gig in there, but obviously you don't want to waste it. If you might as well use it for a 10 gig uplink, but that's, just depends on what you may use it for. And so we have different modules. These are transceivers and that terminate the fiber and puts, basically the light optics into the switch and convert that into something that the switch understands on that port, and then be able to, transmit at different distances using different types of cable. You'll see here it's called, there's modules that are multi-mode, and then there's a single mode type. Multi-mode, you'll see, is typically the shorter distances, less than like 550 meters of distance on the fiber cable, whereas single mode, the models that we currently carry are 10 kilometers type distances. We do have models that are a little shorter than that, but they can go upwards of 80 kilometers. So you can see that's where the implementation of maybe connecting almost intercity fiber together, or long haul buildings or things like that, where there's a dedicated fiber line between them. But then you'll have your gigabit modules, your 10 gig modules, and what will make it really easy for you, especially for the 10 gig uplinks between switches that are on the same rack, is to use what we call our direct attached cables. Those are our DAC 10G-1 meter or DAC 10G or 3 meter cables, and that allows for you to move from even the top top of the rack, a standard 19-inch rack, all the way to the bottom of the rack, and give you a 10 gig uplink with the plug and play simplicity of like an Ethernet cable, but except it has the transceivers just built into it and connected to it. So you don't have to worry about termination. You don't have to worry about, making your own fiber cables for that short of a length, and being able to take advantage of those uplinks that are already available rather than, siphoning off one of your existing either 10 gig ports or gigabit ports for that uplink purpose. So you should be able to use that fairly easily. And they're very cost effective when you compare it all together. Now, there are differences. I mentioned single mode and multi-mode fiber, and these are just some of the diagrams on kind of the differences on it. Single mode has a very small nanometer, point of the glass within the cabling where the light is getting bounced around. And typically it's very focused. So then it typically will go, longer distances in single mode. But there are kind of limitations to the single mode, as you can see. It can still do up to 10 gigs, but you'll see in the diagram right below. Let me see if I can bring up my cool little pointer here. So the differences in the size. So there's an OM1 multi-mode, and then there's the more common is kind of the in-between from a cost perspective, OM2, OM3, OM4, OM5 multi-mode, and the OS2 is the single mode fiber. So these are all different fiber strands that may be used in maybe the cabling that you're trying to choose, and the different kind of fiber grades and the color jackets that are standard within the fibers that you're choosing. So that does make a difference on what you choose and what purpose you're using it for. A lot of customers, who don't understand maybe the kind of the issues with fiber sometimes is that they may end up using a very long distance, high powered fiber transceiver, but use it for a very short distance. So let's say if I was using, a 10-kilometer fiber, but it was only like 500 feet worth of cabling. The problem with that is it will still work, but because of the intensity of the light signal, you may wear down or cause a lot more heat issues. So it may not last as long as if you were using it for that longer distances. Paul does ask, you would love some of my slides, like the one showing the different common fiber strands. Oh, yeah, no problem. This is also recorded as well, so you can always pull that down and capture these as well. But I can definitely provide that to you, Paul. Just send me an email, and I'll send you this this particular slide. The fiber optic cables and the different distances and the different speeds. In general, if you're less than 550 meters. People are always going with the multi-mode fiber, again, because of, cost. And I'll tell you some of the main differences and the main reasons why you would go to that. But let's just look at this particular. Single mode will go up to the 10 kilometers, but support up to 10 gig. But then when you start looking at 25 gig potentially, and then the 40 gig options or 100 gig options, single mode doesn't have that option out there for you. When you're wanting to do those kinds of speeds on the fiber, you then have to use the different OM3 or above to get past those kinds of speeds. And it's all about the condition of the cable, the quality of that cable, and whether or not you can push that kind of signal through and that kind of speed through that kind of signal. So you can see there's those limitations. Of course, it looks like OM5 is probably your best bet. It's probably the most expensive version of that cabling, but you could see it can then push 10 gig all the way to 100 gig, all the way out to 400 meters. So even more so than those other OM3 and 4 for those speeds. But again, you may not have applications where you're needing to push that far of a distance. Between buildings, or if there's no kind of intermediary switch in between that's handling it, a lot of times there would be something within the building or within the demarcation there, the building that is building a ring topology throughout the entire facilities to make sure that all of your fiber and all of your connectivity between the buildings are redundant. Are the OM are mechanically interchangeable? On the most part, yes, because they're still following the same size of cabling itself. And as long as the transceivers are supported for it, then it will work. But in general, yes, that cabling is kind of almost like you get a better quality. It's like when you use Cat 5, Cat 6, Cat 6E, it's like all those different versions of Cat 5 cabling or Cat cabling Ethernet. It's kind of applies to, the optics of this as well. So just how does the, the light signal and how does that get pushed through and how well it does, through the process of it. So, in general, it will be interchangeable. So single mode is more for the short. You can use it for short distance, but its main purpose, I would say, is for long distance cable runs. We have a model that is this kind of a single mode that I think it's like a hybrid, so you can use it for short or for long. And so some people may use that one. It has the highest bandwidth support, and it costs the least, but it has higher electronics costs. So the cost of usually transceivers, or kind of the sophistication of you having to connect one side and the other with a different transmit and receive signaling may add to the cost. And it's hard to terminate due to the smaller core size. So you can see on that single mode diagram previously, it's a very small, piece of glass that is, a hollow tube of glass. And that if you're trying to cut that glass, you have very little room to make mistakes. Like if you crushed something, or if that is like crimped or something like that, that can cause the light signal to obviously not work. So that makes it a little bit more difficult. And so that's why people typically will use multi-mode. It's shorter distances, less than 1,000 feet. It still offers you the high bandwidth support, higher cable costs. Still, like if you're running those cables, you still have those, but not the highest. As compared to, I would say, as compared to Ethernet, it's a higher cabling cost, but it has a lower electronics cost, and it's easier to terminate because of that larger core size. So those are things to consider. And there's some other things to consider while you're choosing fiber as well. Multi-mode is more cost effective over single mode when you're talking about the optics on the fiber, especially for the short reach applications. And I would say majority of people who are doing short reach, unless you're an ISP, they're doing short reach applications. So it's usually within building. Maybe it's, just too far for Ethernet because Ethernet is limited to, 100 meters, but now you needed to go 200 or 400 meters away, or up to 550 meters, within that building or within the floors, right? So that's the other thing, is how you build it out between floors. And that's where I see a lot more of that being used for fiber, when you can pull fiber through the building. It gives you now kind of an upgrade, rather than let's say today, if back, 5 years ago, you pulled a, Cat 5 cable, you'd have to go back through and re-pull, Cat 6 cable if you wanted to go 10 gig now in that building, right? So there's that kind of cost that comes into it. Whereas if you had pulled fiber in the beginning, it kind of future-proofs you for those next iterations. And that's kind of part of the cost that you may take into account. Now, if you're just uplinking between, racks within your server areas, et cetera, then it might not be as big of a deal. But I think in buildings or long-term buildings, new building build-outs can take advantage of the fiber connectivity. We have some ISPs that are out there who have laid their own fiber and now can take advantage of, just by switching out the optics and the transceivers. Now, all of a sudden, on that same exact line where they were offering gigabit, now can offer 10 gig through that connectivity. So without even have to pulling up the cable. So they've already have the fiber in there, and now it's just kind of, again, future-proofing. And, when maybe cost comes down, who knows, people may have a 40 gig or 25 gig connection to the home. You can put it on that exact same fiber. So as long as they've deployed, the OM3 fibers and above, at the very least, then they're kind of set for all the way up to, hundreds of gigs. So that would be, something that to consider, again, when you're building out buildings, if you're in those kinds of projects. The actual costs of multi-mode cable is greater than a single mode, but it's easier to install. Again, easier to install, easier to, terminate. And that's maybe the challenge that maybe average partners, even just myself, I don't like to touch fiber because I need either special cutting tools, equipment, or to verify that I've done the connection right. I have a hard enough time back in the day trying to put, an Ethernet cable together, with crimping. How many of you crimped your own Ethernet cables, right? A lot of us have just pulled out that 1,000-foot roll and just pulled out as long as you needed, crimped it, but then you would crimp it and you're like, oh, it's not working. And then you have to test it and you have a tester, and that became a problem. Now imagine you're doing with fiber that you just, crush the crystal or crush the glass. They have made, new steps. We have some, vendors that we've seen at shows that have very easy fiber termination tools, and using their cabling, it's very flexible, very bendable without having any damage to the optics and the performance of that cable. So it's something to consider when you're, doing your deployments and doing your pulls. Single mode transceivers can cost 1.5 to 4 or 5 times more than multi-mode transceivers. Again, I think it's more not only kind of the optics, the distances that they can go, so they're better tuned for that, and very high, I would say high intensity light nodes, et cetera, for that. But then multi-mode, because it's more readily available, more used, then it kind of a cost of production and cost of use. It's like it's scaled a lot more cost effective there. Multi-mode consumes a lot less power than single mode transceivers as well. So that means a lot less heat. So if you have to consider this, some partners may be oversaturating the fiber switches with things that are producing too much heat than they even need to, and causing things to overheat, especially if they don't have, I would say, proper cooling, or it's not in a server center. But more heat means more cooling, means just overall more cost to run the that particular application as well. Multi-mode, and then also, of course, heat and electronics don't work well, so it makes the kind of the life longevity of those transceivers and the switches potentially could drop in terms of its longevity. Multi-mode optical fiber is easier to install. I think I just mentioned that already a couple of times, and terminate, especially in the field. So you're able to use that to your advantage. So it costs less to install because it's easier to do. You don't have to worry about that. Now, even further out, there's a lot of industry standard groups that are out there, like IEEE, and they include multi-mode optical fiber as kind of the short reach solution for all the next generation speeds. So kind of that 40 gig, 100 gig you already see, but then 50 gig, 200 gig, and 400 gig standards are being worked on for multi-mode optical fiber. And you saw that kind of that spreadsheet on that, when you're using the better quality fiber, it's going to future-proof you out further along. But can you imagine somebody providing you a 400 gig connection to your, prem or something like that? So it's going to move there, but you can see how long it's taking people for even people to start adopting 10 gigs. I think mostly it's because the internet ISP and applications that people are using it for don't need that kind of crazy speed. Now, if you're doing a hotel, or you're doing maybe a kind of a public area that requires a lot of live digital signage or live content that is getting pushed through that network or from the cloud or out to the cloud bidirectionally, that's something may become more prevalent and more available there. Again, it's a cost model. If you gave me a 200 gig connection and it cost me $100 a month at my house, of course I'd pay for it, right? Like that's what I'm already kind of paying for, a 300 meg like connection. So as long as the price scales make sense for the different applications, it's going to move to those. But like I said, it depends on really the competition of the ISPs and who's trying to push the limit and balance the cost at the same time, because obviously they have to have their own cost on, for their pipe at their central NOC at all of their co-locations to make sure that they can push it out at speeds. But I don't think most websites are probably not going to give you like 40 gigs of connectivity to download something. And there might not be enough content, to download 40 gigs in a second, so again, till the applications get to a point where we need those kinds of speeds, it's going to be kind of slow moving. You'll still have your central core. I think it's going to be the big deal as applications still kind of maybe offload to the cloud or maybe locally within the network. Maybe you'll have more, servers that are providing the content for your streaming videos that are cached within the local prem, that needs to have a much higher overall pipe to facilitate all the different applications that are happening on that network. So I can see that happening going forward as well. There's new generation multi-mode optical fiber called wideband. So OM5 multi-mode optical fiber that's on the horizon. So I think that's what's part of that list there. So that's something that we're, have to consider now. Kind of stepping back, that's really far out. I don't think Zyxel is going to have yet, 200 gig and 400 gig type switches to be able to manage those kinds of applications yet. But we are on the horizon over the next, I would say, year and a half, 2 years. We are already kind of looking at an all 10 gig fibers type switch. Right now, you see a lot of XGS type switches with gigabit ports with 10 gig uplinks. How many of you would have an application or a solution to provide or to sell where you would need a 10 gig 10 gig ports, all 10 gigs, like 48 10 gig ports with a 10 gig or 25 gig ports, so kind of options there, with 40 gig and 100 gig uplink ports. So again, it's like that next step up, right? It's like just multiply the numbers, upwards, and you get this kind of new switch. The main reason that we have that kind of switch coming out is not only is it our flagship type switch, but it's also to help facilitate partners like yourself who might be doing, let's say, multi-tenant, very large resort applications as well, that's uplinking fiber to the edge switches that are providing the PoE to the Wi-Fi network, et cetera. But they want everything within the ring, terminating to a bunch of switches that can handle 100 gigs between them, or 10 gig, at least 10 gig to those all those endpoints, with 100 gig, or even with link aggregation, 600 gig or 300 gigs worth of data being able to pass between that network. Again, we would see this in a resort that might have TV, video, streaming, all of that kind of cached within the local, so they don't have to spend the bandwidth necessarily to always get new content, but can cache that content within the prem, and then be able to serve those cached content, to all those TVs or on-demand type services. So that's something that you'll see mostly on those kind of bigger switches and those kind of applications. The different transceivers that you see here, these are some of the accessories that we sell at Zyxel. You'll see the SFP10G, those are our 10 gig modules. So there are different types, the SRs and LR. They will typically do different wavelengths, which means it goes different distances. You'll see a -E. This is something that we haven't really publicized, and I think that's why I like to have this kind of webinar. It can educate you and let you guys know as partners that we have this kind of solution. So the SR-E, all that E stands for is it's like an economy pack. It's like a pack of 10 SRs. So SFP10G-SR-E, there's 10 of those in a bundled pack, and it gives you a very steep discount. So if you're buying it for a project or application, you want to buy those ones if you have 10 or more. Or if you're just like, hey, I want to stock, I'm going to use 5 and I'm going to need 5 later on, buy the E, because then it's going to cost you less than if you just bought all 10 individually. So take advantage of some of those pricing there, you'll find with those. And then the SFP, just the regular SFPs, those are all gigabit, and again, different duplexes that could be single duplex, a single LC or duplex LC, different transmit receives, so that you can go different distances as well. You'll notice we also sell an SFP-1000T, also a SFP-10G-T. Those basically will terminate a fiber port. Maybe you have an extra fiber port and turn it into an RJ45 Ethernet port. So let's say you have a SFP-10G, you have a SFP plus slot within your switch. You can buy this transceiver, put it in there, and then it becomes a 10 gig copper, uplink if you want to take advantage and utilize it that way. It's, I would say, cost though, it's fairly like, I would say expensive for it versus like buying like a 10 gig switch, like if you just got it that way. But you may just say, hey, it's only, a smaller amount to get that extra 10 gig than to buy a brand new switch to do the whole thing. So it's just a matter of you weighing in like what you already have out there, or you may just need like, I just need one more port, right? That's a 10 gig. So you can manage it this way as well. So you can take advantage of some of those XGS switches that have those 10 gig ports that you're not even utilizing, but you could use them for either Ethernet uplinks or to send it to a server or to a backup server, et cetera. And then the direct attached cables that you see down there. So some of the application scenarios, this is more of like a hospitality scenario. You can see it's like a XGS 4600 32F right here. That's kind of the core. You have your firewall that goes to the internet, but then the core 10 gig could be connected to multicast servers, NVRs, et cetera, that's providing content or video for your IP cameras getting recorded to the NVRs. A wireless solution, this one has, meeting rooms with Wi-Fi for a VoIP network. You have your hallway cameras, your guest IPTV, you have your wireless guest room, and, public areas. So fiber going to these switches that provide the PoE so that you have a 10 gig uplink or a gigabit uplink between them. So these, even though it says GS 2220s, you would go gigabit here. There are 4 10 gig SFP plus ports on this particular 32F switch here that you could use to uplink multiple XGSs together, or again, going to maybe another 10 gig switch that goes to your NVR network. So it depends on how you've deployed it and how you've made the connectivity for these kinds of applications. This is a little bit more extensive. It's between different buildings. So it's kind of an expansion. So let's say that hotel has multiple buildings. You still have within the building the same kind of application, but then you have maybe 10 gigs that are going to between the buildings so that you have a bigger bigger uplink pipe for the entire network to push traffic through. And that's something to consider. Sometimes people will just have the entire network is all gigabit, but you'll have to look at where your bottleneck might be, because if you only have a 1 gigabit connection that goes to a switch that it only is taken in a 1 gig port, and you're not doing any kind of link aggregation to expand that size, or you're not using 10 gig, then it's only going at 1 gig. So you can imagine 10 1 gig ports going down to 1 gig, right? That's going to be your ultimate bottleneck of just a 1 gig connection. So depends on if you're trying to serve IPTV, other applications, that might not be enough depending on how many clients are pushing, gigabit to that 1 gig. So again, keep that in when you draw your diagrams. I also, tell folks that to make sure that you're doing your ring topology uplinks. So you have multiple lines that are getting pulled so that you can have it going in a loop and turning on, of course, rapid spanning tree and all those, things that will break the loop for you. So you don't have to worry about broadcast storms, et cetera, that might be happening in the network. And so you want to have them going from, first switch to the second to the third, and then the third all the way back to the first switch. So you're making that ring topology. So if any one of the switches go down, there's no daisy chain that is broken. So there's always a path that can make it back to, your main uplink. So something that to always consider when you're building out and pulling cable. Since you're already pulling a cable, might as well pull 2 or might as well pull 4, right? It's just pull pairs of them as you go, because who knows what you might need and what application you're going to end up using it for there. So in the long haul, it's going to be much, much better for you. So 10 gig fiber between most applications that we're seeing now. So that's why our XGS series, like 10 gig 2220s, work really well with our XS 3800s, because those provide 10 gig layer 3 fiber ports. So they're all switchable between Ethernet or fiber. So then you can choose those to uplink all of your 10 gig uplinks switches in the building, and then put all your gigabit, connectivity for guest rooms and other applications going into that switch. Here's just another smaller kind of example. Again, just using your fiber. It could be for connecting between different offices, And we have different branches that are all interconnected as well, managed through Nebula. So we can manage all of those applications. Or if you're connecting businesses, a small office, you might not need any fiber here, but it could be something that you're terminating fiber to. So you can take one of our fiber switches that have a bunch of gigabit uplink fibers and terminate. So some customers, some ISPs will actually use our GS 1920-8HP and use the gigabit fiber to provide them a fiber to the prem. So let's say this is an office building. You have a fiber switch that's in the MDU there, and now you're bringing fiber to the office space, and now you can offer, synchronous gigabit speeds. And I think that's the big advantage right now, especially work from home, and something that you can sell into the market is that most home networks or most office networks, if you're getting, DSL or cable modem, it's usually asynchronous. You get a very fast download speed, but then the upload speeds are like 10 megabits or maybe 25 megabits at the most. So the problem with that is if that's your office and people are remote connecting into your office, the office is only sending up 25 megs a second. That means I can only download at 25 megs a second. So that's 25 megabits per second. And so that makes it more difficult for many office people to then remotely work, right, in that kind of scenario, even through VPN. So the fiber connectivity now would give you, let's say if you did offer a gigabit, that'd be gigabit down and gigabit up type speeds. So it's something definitely is something to consider when you're selling into this. And that's a great selling point of using fiber, is now you're getting just as if you connected an Ethernet cable to that office, directly, and getting that up and download speeds. But then you can deliver that to multiple offices in an MDU. You can convert that into a larger office if you'd like, and then maybe disseminate that within the network using higher end switches. Maybe you have a higher end Wi-Fi. You need to then add loop guard connectivity, virtual stacking, fiber through multiple buildings, maybe multiple floors, because it's a bigger office space. Then you would want to do that as well. And not be limited by an Ethernet cable length. Or here, like an ISP, you can then another hospitality type application for IP and surveillance. And all of our switches kind of come together by all the feature sets that's available to them. So I'm not going to cover all the details that our switches, if you're familiar with our switches already, this is something that you already know about. But the main thing that people always ask, does it do VLAN? Does it do, automatic kind of VLAN capabilities? That's what these products can do for you. It also has intelligent PoE for applications. So even though you're bringing fiber, you're delivering that connectivity via wireless or to an IPTV or something like that. So many different applications that you can use it for to connect. You can use our Nebula cloud management platform with most of these, all of these gigabit fiber. So gives you visibility on the topology. You can virtually stack these switches together, gives you, drillable, clickable ports that you can then drill into and see what devices are there, and be able to do diagnostics and real-time reporting, and to see like a PoE consumption all the way down to the end device. And then be able to use the Nebula platform to cloud backup, you can backup and restore configurations. You can add support security within it as well to do 802.1x authentication. I think security is a big deal when somebody just takes, a switch off the shelf somewhere in a retail store and puts it in for their business. They don't realize that then you can, somebody else can come in, plug in a router by accident, or plug in their own other devices and get connectivity if you don't have the security, the ACLs that are built in to some of these business class products that help you facilitate that. Also DHCP and LoopGuard is preventing people from kind of destroying your network using DHCP. And then resilient functions like link aggregation to make higher connections. So you can then link ag multiple 10 gig ports to get like a 20 gig port, or maybe 3 of them. So go 3 from one switch to another 3 on the other switch. Now you have 30 gigs of connectivity. So you can play with that and give yourself room for the future without having to necessarily upgrade now to a 40 gig uplink switch or a 100 gig uplink switch. It probably is enough to do the link aggregation there. And with Nebula, you can automatically deploy these products and very easily to configure within the cloud. And it's really hassle-free deployment. So some of the models that have fiber uplinks to them, I'm just going to speed through these real quick. Is our GS1350. These are primarily our CCTV switches with extended distance power, extended range support as well, and then stronger surge protection with high PoE power capabilities. The 1920 series is our gigabit, our GS, and this is our kind of our bread and butter that people primarily buy and use in different applications because it has those uplink ports, has kind of a great price point, gives you an option for Nebula Cloud if you needed to, or you can use it in the free cloud, but has both gigabit versions and then also our XGS 1930s, which is our 10 gig uplink versions. So these are two of the best sellers. So if you're trying to decide, I always tell partners to start here at this series, the 1920 and 1930 series, and then decide, do you need to go up or do I need to go further down because my application is not very sophisticated or very simple. But primarily most of our partners, again, they're buying the 1920s and 1930s series. If you're looking at pure 10 gig or multi-gig applications, our XS 1930 series, still again the same software feature set in the 1930s and 1920 series, but now it gives you flexible multi-gig, or let's say you have some smaller concentration of 10 gig switches. This can offer you a 12F, so 12 10 gig SFP plus 2 Ethernet RJ45, like 10 gig uplinks as well. So you can mix and match and use it that way. But we also have applications that may need the multi-gig connectivity or 10 gig copper to provide Wi-Fi 6 and 6E type connectivity. And that has the PoE port there too. So that's our 12 HP. And then our new XMG 1930 series, this is our multi-gigs switch. So it has 10 gig and 5 gig and 2.5 gig options in there with and without PoE. So you can kind of pick and choose there for that kind of application. And our GS2220 is our fully layer 2 managed and layer 3, I would say layer 3 light to layer 2 plus, however you want to look at that, with multicast, IGMP snooping. So if you're doing kind of a multi-network, you're delivering voice, video, data, you want it with Nebula Pro, it's a converged network and needs 10 gig or gigabit connectivity, this is probably the switch that you would go with. It has a CLI as well if you need to, but most people will use it in our Nebula Pro because it comes with 1 year of Nebula Pro bundled with it. And then we just recently launched our XGS 2220. It's still the same firmware as our 2220 series, but now it has 10 gig uplinks. So it's a fully layer 2 managed with 10 gig and manageable in our Nebula platform, included with a 1 year Pro pack. As well. So we have our 24 port SFP version. So this is different from our previous XGS 2210 series. We have a version that is a 24 port SFP and a 4 port SFP plus uplink on this, the 30F. So XGS 2220-30F is that model that you see, or it should be right here. Then we have, of course, 42 and 48 versions. One other difference that we have in this new series is the PoE power budget. So our standard model, the XGS 2220-54 HP, that has 600 watt PoE. So more than the 380 that we used to have in these kind of level of switches. But then we offer a 54 FP. So now it's 960 watts of power. So again, maximizing those applications that are power hungry for your voice, video, your Wi-Fi type applications. And then our XS 3800 that I mentioned earlier, this is kind of I call it our Frankenstein of 10 gig switches because it has very flexible combo ports. So it's 8 combo, 10 gig copper plus SFP. So these are the combo ports here, and they can flip. So you can have basically like 24 ports of fiber SFP 10 gig SFP plus, or you can flip it the other way and you can have 24 so you can have the copper, you can use the copper for those. So it can give you like 12 copper, multi-gig or 10 gig. And then with still the 16 SFPs. And it's also managed in our Nebula Cloud platform as well. And then our XGS 4600, this is like our flagship layer 3. It has the advanced, if you need OSPF, there's a advanced license that can be added as well to open up like basic routing, SFP, RIP, OSPF, that kind of stuff on the layer 3 level for this kind of switch. And this is more like an ISP level switch, I would say. This is a 10 gig, these are all gigabit ports with 10 gig uplinks. So this is all 48 ports is gigabit fiber. So then basically we're looking at creating versions of this one, but where the fiber ports are all 10 gig or 25 gig capable transceivers with, 100 gig, 40 gig and 100 gig plus uplinks there. But again, something that that we have, so that when you come across some of these applications, you might, maybe it comes to mind that Zyxel has this. And that's my goal in a lot of these is to educate and to also inform, and also to keep us in the forefront of your mind. And as a partner, if you haven't joined our partner program, we have a partner program that works through these distribution partners, D&H, Ingram, TD SYNNEX, Wave, Target, and Pace. And you get your backend rebates through this program while you log in. So if you're not signed up already, sign up. You get access to this, to these. And hopefully, if you're not gold already, I hope that you strive to be, because you get kind of the maximum support, maximum offering that we have available. And it's not really, that, I would say, that difficult per se, to get that kind of qualifying sales. So if you can do 12K in 6 months, which is 2K a month in Zyxel products, that's probably like 2 switches a month, depending on the model, that you would hit gold partner. So a really kind of low barrier of entry. A lot of our new partners may have a project that just takes them straight to gold. So if you have one of those kind of projects and you're not sitting at gold yet, let us know and we can work something out, and maybe we can just, upon the order, we can give you that gold pricing. So that can help you out there. And if you'd like to connect with us, Zyxel-US-channel on LinkedIn, or on YouTube, you can go to Zyxel America channel. We'll have this webinar and any of the other webinars that we've done in the past on that channel as well. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn if you'd like. It's just search for Zyxel Try, and you'll find me on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, I'm not going to take any questions. I have to go ahead to the airport, right after this. So if you do have any questions, please send them to me. It's try@zyxel.com, and I would love to be able to answer those questions or send you in the right direction. So if you have any thoughts, comments, if this has been helpful to you, I'd love to hear from you. And hopefully, we learned something together on this edition of Tech Talk. So until next time, I'm gonna cut it just a few minutes short and give you the rest of your 10 minutes on your day back here today. But I thank you very much for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you and maybe seeing you at a event soon. We do have a Top Golf. If you happen to be in the Pennsylvania area next week, I believe it's next week. We're going to be in Prussia. Not Russia, but Prussia, or King of Prussia in Pennsylvania at the Top Golf there next week. So if you haven't yet registered, you can always drop me an email for the link to get registered. But we'd love to be able to see you, meet you, and talk to you, and have some time together on this like meet and greet at Top Golf. So if you can make it, great. If I can see you there, great. But if not, until next time, we'll see you at another Tech Talk. Thank you for your time. Have a great rest of your day and afternoon.